Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, following all the spiritual principles, maintaining your faith, and yet nothing seemed to be moving in your life? You wake up each morning with the same struggles, the same unanswered prayers, the same silent heavens that seem indifferent to your deepest longings. You have tried to be patient. You have tried to trust. You have tried to believe that something greater is orchestrating events behind the scenes, but the evidence before your eyes tells a different story. The bills keep coming, the relationships remain broken, the health concerns persist, and that deep sense of purpose you once felt so clearly now seems like a distant memory, almost like a dream you can barely recall. You wonder if you misunderstood something fundamental about how the universe works. If perhaps all those teachings about divine timing and sacred providence were just beautiful stories meant to comfort those who cannot accept the harsh randomness of existence. But what if I told you that the very moment when everything appears most hopeless, most stagnant, most impossibly stuck, is precisely the moment when providence is about to reveal itself in your life in ways you could never have orchestrated or imagined? What if the silence you have been interpreting as absence is actually the sacred pause before a miracle that arrives without warning, without announcement, without any of the signs you thought you needed to see? Manlypalmerhall, one of the most profound interpreters of ancient mystery teachings, understood something about the nature of providence that most spiritual seekers miss entirely. He recognized that the universe operates according to laws that are simultaneously mechanical and miraculous, that there exists a divine intelligence weaving through all events. But this intelligence does not work according to our limited human timelines or our anxious need for constant reassurance. Hall taught that providence, which we might understand as the benevolent organizing principle behind all existence, works most powerfully in the darkness, in the waiting, in those periods when we feel most abandoned by grace. The ancient mystery schools called this the principle of invisible preparation, the understanding that every visible manifestation is preceded by a long period of invisible gestation, where forces beyond our perception are aligning, arranging, and preparing the conditions for what must eventually emerge into physical reality. We live in a culture that has trained us to expect instant results, to become anxious when we cannot see immediate progress, to interpret delay as denial and silence as rejection. But the wisdom traditions understood something we have forgotten, that the truly transformative moments in life never announce themselves with fanfare. They arrive suddenly, unexpectedly, often disguised as ordinary moments that only reveal their sacred significance in retrospect. The first principle we must grasp about how providence operates is that it functions according to spiritual laws of correspondence and timing that are far more precise than anything in the physical world. When you plant a seed in the ground, you do not dig it up every day to check if it is growing. You trust the invisible processes occurring beneath the soil, knowing that if you provide the right conditions of water, sunlight, and nutrients, the seed will eventually break through the surface at exactly the right moment. Yet when it comes to our prayers, our intentions, our deepest desires for transformation, we lack this same trust in invisible processes. We want to see evidence every day that something is happening. We want reassurance that our efforts are not in vain. We want proof that the universe has heard us and is responding to our requests. Hall taught that this constant need for visible confirmation actually interferes with the very processes we are trying to catalyze, like a person who keeps opening the oven door to check on bread that is trying to rise, letting out the heat and preventing the proper transformation from occurring. Providence works through what the Hermetic philosophers called the law of gestation, the understanding that every level of reality has its own timing, and that attempting to rush spiritual processes is as futile as trying to force a flower to bloom before its time. The miracle you are waiting for is not delayed because the universe is ignoring you, or because you are somehow unworthy of receiving it. The miracle is being prepared with a precision that takes into account thousands of variables you cannot see, aligning circumstances, preparing other people who will play crucial roles, removing obstacles that would have prevented you from fully receiving what is coming, and most importantly, transforming you internally so that when the miracle arrives, you will be ready to recognize it, embrace it, and use it in alignment with your highest purpose. Consider the story Hall often referenced about the ancient initiates who sought wisdom in the mystery temples of Egypt and Greece. These seekers would arrive at the temple gates having traveled great distances, often sacrificing everything they owned for the opportunity to receive the secret teachings. But they were not immediately admitted into the inner chambers where the mysteries were revealed. Instead, they were made to wait, sometimes for months or even years, performing mundane tasks, living in silence, enduring tests that seemed to have nothing to do with the spiritual knowledge they sought. Many abandoned the quest during this period of waiting, convinced that they had been deceived or that the teachers had forgotten about them. But those who persevered eventually understood that the waiting itself was the teaching, that every moment of seemingly pointless delay was actually preparing them for revelations they could not have received in their earlier state of consciousness. The frustration of waiting was burning away their arrogance, their attachment to their own timeline, their need to control the process of their own transformation. When they were finally called into the inner sanctum, they discovered that everything they had experienced during the waiting period had been carefully orchestrated to prepare them for what they were about to receive. This is precisely how Providence operates in your life right now. What feels like abandonment is actually initiation. What appears as delay is actually divine timing. What seems like silence is actually the sacred pause before something breaks through that will change everything. At this moment, I want to pause and ask, have you ever felt that you are ready to receive your miracle, but the universe seems to be making you wait without any explanation? That sensation that you have done everything right, followed all the spiritual guidance, but still nothing changes on the surface of your life? If you are experiencing this sacred frustration now, know that you are not alone in this journey of active waiting. Share in the comments by simply writing "still waiting" so that other spiritual seekers know they are not alone in this phase of invisible preparation. Sometimes, the simple act of acknowledging where we are in the journey is already a powerful step toward the miracle that is coming. Your comment might be exactly the sign someone needed to keep trusting, even when all external evidence suggests giving up. I appreciate your courage to show up, to bring your truth to this community of souls in transformation. The second principle about Providence that Hall illuminated through his study of ancient wisdom is that miracles never arrive through the doors we are watching. We develop such fixed ideas about how our breakthrough should occur, what form it should take, who should be involved, what sequence of events should unfold. We pray for a specific outcome and then we monitor obsessively for any sign of that exact outcome beginning to materialize. But Providence, in its infinite intelligence, knows that what we think we want is often just a symbol for something deeper that we actually need. You might be praying desperately for financial abundance, spending all your attention looking for signs of money coming into your life, completely missing the relationships, opportunities, and inner transformations that are actually being prepared to address the root cause of your financial struggles. You might be focused entirely on healing a particular relationship, checking your phone constantly for a message from that person, while Providence is actually bringing you experiences that will heal the deeper wound in your own heart that created the pattern you keep repeating in relationships. The Taoist masters understood this principle deeply, teaching about Wu Wei, the action of non-action, the understanding that the most powerful way to move through life is to remain open and responsive, rather than rigidly attached to specific outcomes. When you release your grip on exactly how your miracle must appear, you create space for Providence to deliver something far more perfectly aligned with your true needs than anything your limited human perspective could have designed. Hall spoke often about the principle of divine substitution, the mysterious way that Providence will remove something from your life that you were clinging to desperately, only to replace it with something infinitely better that you could not have received while you were still holding on to the lesser thing. This principle is one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual development because it requires us to trust the process, even when it feels like loss, even when it looks like things are falling apart rather than coming together. You lose a job that you thought was your security, and you interpret this as evidence that Providence has abandoned you. But 6 months later, you realize that losing that job freed you to discover your true calling, something you never would have had the courage to pursue if you had remained comfortable in that position. A relationship that you thought was your destiny ends painfully, and you feel like your prayers have been ignored. But a year later, you meet someone who reflects back to you a level of love and understanding you did not even know was possible, and you recognize that you had to release the comfortable but ultimately unfulfilling connection to make space for the real thing. This is how Providence works. not by granting your specific requests like some cosmic vending machine, but by orchestrating your life with such precision that every apparent setback is actually a setup for something more aligned with your soul's highest trajectory. The miracle that is coming to you is being customized specifically for you, taking into account not just your conscious desires but the deeper needs of your soul that you might not even be aware of yet. The third principle that Hall emphasized is that Providence operates through what appears to be ordinary coincidences, synchronicities, and chance encounters that only reveal their miraculous nature when you look back at how everything connected. Carl Jung, deeply influenced by the same esoteric traditions that informed Hall's work, called this synchronicity, the causal connecting principle that links inner psychological states with outer events in ways that transcend our conventional understanding of cause and effect. You think randomly about someone you have not spoken to in years, and within hours they reach out to you with exactly the information or opportunity you needed in that moment. You take a wrong turn while driving and end up in a location where you encounter someone who becomes instrumental in your next chapter. You lose your keys, and while searching for them, you discover a book that contains the exact insight you needed to break through a problem you have been struggling with for months. These are not accidents. These are the subtle signatures of Providence, the way the invisible intelligence of the universe communicates with you, through the language of meaningful coincidence. But most people miss these signs entirely because they are looking for dramatic, unmistakable miracles, while Providence prefers to work through the quiet poetry of everyday synchronicity. The ancient mystery traditions taught that the awakened person learns to read the book of life, to recognize the symbolic significance of events that ordinary consciousness dismisses as random chance. Hall taught that developing what he called spiritual perception is essential for recognizing when Providence is beginning to move in your life. This is not about becoming superstitious or seeing signs and omens in everything, which is actually a form of spiritual immaturity. True spiritual perception is about cultivating a quality of presence and awareness that allows you to notice the subtle shifts in the energy of your life, the feeling that something is changing even before external circumstances reflect that change. You might wake up one morning with a strange sense of anticipation, as if something significant is approaching even though nothing in your outer world has changed yet. You might find yourself spontaneously releasing old grudges or fears that have held you for years, not because you worked at it but because something inside you simply lets go. You might notice that certain people or situations that once triggered intense reactions in you no longer have that power, a sign that inner transformation has occurred at a level deeper than your conscious effort. These are the invisible movements that precede visible miracles, the energetic preparation that must happen before physical reality can reorganize itself into new patterns. The Kabbalistic tradition speaks of this as the descent of light from higher worlds into lower worlds, a process that occurs in stages, first transforming your consciousness, then affecting your emotional body, then eventually manifesting in the material plane. When you begin to notice these subtle shifts in your inner world, you are actually witnessing the early stages of a miracle that is already in motion, even though external evidence may still be absent. The fourth principle Hall illuminated is that the magnitude of the miracle is directly proportional to the depth of the preparation. The soul that has been waiting longest, struggling most intensely, surrendering most completely, is the one being prepared for the greatest breakthrough. This is why the darkest hour is truly before the dawn, not as a poetic metaphor but as a spiritual law. When every human avenue seems exhausted, when every door you tried to open has closed, when every person you thought would help you has disappointed you, when every strategy you attempted has failed, you have reached the 0 point, the place of complete surrender where miracles become possible precisely because you have finally stopped trying to force outcomes through your limited human will. The alchemical tradition called this the nigredo, the blackening stage where all the impurities of the false self must be burned away before the gold of the true self can be revealed. You thought you were experiencing failure, but you were actually undergoing purification. You thought you were being punished, but you were actually being prepared. You thought God had forgotten you, but you were actually being loved with such precision that every moment of your struggle was exactly what your soul needed to transform into the version of yourself that can receive and steward the miracle that is coming. Hall often referenced the biblical story of Joseph, who spent years in slavery and prison for crimes he did not commit, before suddenly being elevated to a position of immense power and influence where he could save entire nations from famine. During those years in prison, Joseph could not have known that his suffering was preparation, that every betrayal and injustice was somehow part of a larger design, that the very people who had harmed him were unconsciously serving a divine plan that would eventually reveal its perfection. This is perhaps the most challenging teaching about providence, that even the harmful actions of others, the injustices you have suffered, the pain that seemed so meaningless, can be woven into a larger tapestry where everything serves your ultimate evolution. This does not mean that the harm was justified or that you should not have healthy boundaries with toxic people. It means that nothing is wasted in the economy of the soul, that even the most painful experiences are composted by providence into the rich soil from which new life eventually grows. When your miracle arrives, you will look back at your period of waiting and struggle with completely different eyes, recognizing that it was all necessary, that you needed to become who you became through that process in order to be ready for what you are about to receive. The fifth principle involves understanding that providence often delivers miracles through what appears to be increased difficulty right before the breakthrough. This is one of the most cruel ironies of spiritual development, and one of the main reasons people give up right before their transformation would have occurred. You have been waiting patiently, maintaining your faith, doing your inner work, and suddenly everything seems to get worse instead of better. The financial pressure intensifies, the health crisis escalates, the relationship conflict reaches a breaking point, and you interpret this as evidence that you were wrong to trust, that there is no providence watching over you, that you should abandon your spiritual path and return to the familiar patterns of your old life. But Hall taught that this intensification is actually a sign that you are on the threshold of breakthrough, that the old structures of your life are collapsing precisely because they cannot contain the new energy that is trying to emerge. The caterpillar must completely dissolve into liquid inside the cocoon before it can reorganize into a butterfly. There is a moment in that process that looks like total destruction, where if you could see inside the cocoon, you would think the caterpillar was dying rather than transforming. This is where many people are right now, in the liquefaction stage, experiencing the dissolution of everything they thought defined them, not recognizing that this breakdown is actually breakthrough in progress. The mystery schools taught that there are guardian forces at the threshold of every significant transformation, what they called the dwellers on the threshold, archetypal challenges that test whether you are truly ready to move to the next level of consciousness. These guardians appear as intensified versions of your greatest fears, your deepest wounds, your most persistent patterns. They are not there to prevent your transformation, but to ensure that you are genuinely ready for what exists on the other side of the threshold. This is why your triggers become more intense right before your healing, why your financial fear spikes right before abundance arrives, why your loneliness feels most acute right before you meet your true community. The guardian is giving you one final opportunity to process and release the energy that would sabotage your miracle if you carried it with you into the new chapter. When you understand this principle, you stop interpreting increased difficulty as evidence that you are going in the wrong direction, and you start recognizing it as confirmation that you are very close to the breakthrough you have been preparing for. The miracle does not arrive despite the intensification of challenge. It arrives through it and because of it, as you prove to yourself and to the universe that you have developed the spiritual musculature to handle greater levels of responsibility, power, and blessing. Hall emphasized that one of the primary ways we block providence is through our addiction to complaining and our identification with victim consciousness. Every time you tell the story of your struggle from a place of victimhood, every time you rehearse your grievances, every time you focus your attention on how unfair your situation is, you are actually reinforcing the very patterns that are preventing your miracle from manifesting. This is not about suppressing legitimate grief or pretending that injustice did not occur. It is about recognizing that at a certain point, the story of your wound becomes more important to you than your actual healing, that you have developed an identity around being the person to whom bad things happen, and this identity creates a magnetic field that attracts more experiences that confirm your victimhood. The spiritual warrior learns to transmute pain into wisdom, to transform grievance into gratitude, not through bypassing the reality of suffering, but through discovering the gold hidden inside the wound. When you can tell the story of your struggle from a place of power rather than victimhood, when you can recognize that every challenge refined you rather than diminished you, when you can feel genuine appreciation for how your difficulties developed capacities in you that ease never could have created, You have shifted your consciousness in a way that removes the primary obstacle between you and the miracle that Providence has been preparing. The Buddhist teaching of the second arrow is relevant here. The first arrow is the painful event that happens to you, which you have no control over. The second arrow is the story you tell yourself about the painful event, the meaning you assign to it, the identity you build around it, and this second arrow is entirely within your control. Most of your suffering comes not from the original difficulty, but from the narrative you have constructed about what that difficulty means about you, about life, about whether you are loved by the universe. Hall taught that the awakened soul learns to extract wisdom from every experience without allowing any experience to define them or limit their sense of what is possible. This is the difference between being shaped by your circumstances and being refined by them. When Providence sees that you have learned this crucial lesson, that you can maintain your center and your faith regardless of external conditions, you have passed one of the most important initiatory tests, and the universe begins to entrust you with greater levels of creative power, because you have proven that you will not misuse that power or allow it to corrupt your integrity. The sixth principle about Providence is that it often works through unexpected helpers, through people who appear in your life at exactly the right moment with exactly what you need. But here is the paradox that most people miss. Providence cannot send you these helpers if you are closed off, defended, isolated, or convinced that you must do everything alone. One of the primary ways we block miracles is through our pride, our reluctance to be vulnerable, our fear of depending on anyone, our belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Hall taught that the universe is fundamentally relational, that consciousness itself is a field of interconnection, and that your miracle will almost certainly involve the participation of other people in ways you cannot orchestrate or predict. This means you must be willing to be seen in your need, to admit that you do not have all the answers, to accept support even when it comes from unexpected sources, or requires you to let go of your carefully constructed self-image. The person who becomes your greatest benefactor might be someone you initially dismissed or judged. The opportunity that changes everything might come through a conversation you almost did not have because you were too tired or too discouraged to show up that day. Providence is always trying to reach you through 1,000 different channels, but if you have closed yourself off emotionally, if you have decided that everyone is untrustworthy or that the world is inherently hostile, you create an energetic barrier that even divine intelligence cannot penetrate without violating your free will. There is profound wisdom in the ancient practice of hospitality, the understanding that you must always treat strangers with respect and generosity, because you never know when you might be entertaining angels unaware. This is not superstition, but a recognition of how Providence often disguises its interventions in ordinary human interactions. The person who makes a casual comment that shifts your entire perspective, the stranger who offers you information that opens an unexpected door, the colleague who mentions your name to someone who later becomes crucial to your path. These are the instruments through which Providence operates most frequently, but you only recognize these moments as miraculous in retrospect, which means you must approach every interaction, every encounter, every conversation as potentially sacred, as possibly containing the seed of the miracle you have been waiting for. This requires a quality of presence and openness that is rare in our distracted, preoccupied culture, where most people move through their days on autopilot, missing the subtle invitations that Providence is constantly extending. Hall taught that there is a spiritual principle called the law of the vacuum, which states that you cannot receive something new until you create space for it by releasing something old. This is why miracles often arrive only after you have let go of your desperate grasping, your anxious attachment to specific outcomes, your need to control every aspect of how your life unfolds. As long as your hands are tightly gripped around what you already have, even if what you have is painful or limiting, there is no room for Providence to place something better in your hands. The universe is trying to give you a gift, but you are so busy clinging to the familiar, so afraid of the temporary void that would open if you released your grip, that you cannot receive what is being offered. This is perhaps the ultimate test of faith, the willingness to let go of the known without any guarantee of what will replace it, trusting that the intelligence that created you and sustains you has not brought you this far, only to abandon you now. When you can stand in that emptiness, that space of not knowing, that void between what was and what will be, you have created the sacred container in which miracles become not only possible, but inevitable. The seventh principle Hall illuminated is that your miracle is already complete in the invisible realms and is now in the process of manifesting into physical reality. This is the profound teaching at the heart of the Hermetic axiom, as above so below, as within so without. Everything that exists in the material world first exists as a pattern in higher dimensions of reality, what Plato called the realm of forms, or what the Kabbalists call the world of Atziluth, pure archetypal consciousness. Your miracle exists right now as a perfect template in these higher dimensions, and it is gradually descending through progressively denser levels of reality, becoming more concrete, more tangible, more physical, with each stage of descent. This is why you sometimes have dreams or visions or intuitive flashes where you can see or feel the reality you are moving toward, even though it has not manifested yet. You are actually perceiving the miracle in its early stages of manifestation, when it is still in the more fluid, energetic dimensions before it solidifies into physical form. The more you can hold the vision and the feeling of your miracle as already real, already accomplished in higher dimensions, the more you accelerate its manifestation into your physical experience. This is not the same as the oversimplified version of manifestation teaching that tells you to just think positive thoughts and everything you want will magically appear. True understanding of how Providence works requires recognizing that you are co-creating with a vast intelligence that knows far more than your conscious mind about what you actually need and when you are ready to receive it. Your job is not to control the process, but to align yourself with it, to prepare yourself internally for what is trying to emerge, to clear away the obstacles in your own consciousness that would prevent you from recognizing or receiving your miracle when it arrives. This means doing your psychological work, healing your wounds, examining your unconscious beliefs about whether you deserve goodness, releasing your attachment to suffering as a form of identity, and cultivating the qualities of consciousness that match the reality you wish to experience. Providence is not a supernatural intervention that bypasses natural law, but a higher application of natural law that works through your consciousness, through your energy, through your choices and actions, in ways that create outcomes that appear miraculous from a limited perspective, but are actually the precise unfolding of spiritual principles that never vary. The eighth and final principle about Providence is that it requires your active participation at exactly the right moment. There is a time to wait, to surrender, to trust the invisible processes that are preparing your miracle. But there is also a moment when the door opens and you must have the courage to walk through it, when the opportunity presents itself and you must act decisively, when the inspiration strikes and you must follow it even if it does not make logical sense. Many people miss their miracle because they have become so comfortable in the waiting stage, so identified with being patient and surrendering, that when the moment of action arrives they do not recognize it, or they hesitate because it feels risky or uncertain. Hall taught that spiritual development requires the balance of masculine and feminine principles, of receptivity and action, of surrendering to divine timing while also being ready to move boldly when the signal comes. The ancient Greeks personified this as Kairos, the god of opportune moments, of perfect timing, understanding that there are windows in time when conditions align in such a way that actions that would have been impossible or ineffective at other times suddenly become not only possible but inevitable if you have the awareness to recognize the opening and the courage to move through it. Your miracle is not going to arrive with a detailed instruction manual and a guarantee of success. It is going to arrive disguised as an opportunity that requires you to step beyond your comfort zone, to risk failure, to act on faith before you have complete certainty. It might arrive as a sudden intuition to call someone you have not spoken to in years. It might arrive as an unexpected job offer in a field you have no experience in. It might arrive as a persistent inner prompting to start something even though you do not feel ready. It might arrive as a chance encounter that leads to a conversation that opens a door you did not even know existed. The people who receive their miracles are not the ones who waited passively for everything to be perfect. They are the ones who developed the spiritual sensitivity to recognize when Providence was creating an opening, and the courage to move toward it even with trembling hands and a racing heart. This is the final test, whether you have been so transformed by the waiting period that when your moment arrives, you will have the faith and the boldness to claim what has been prepared for you. Everything we have explored points to this ultimate truth. Your miracle is not coming someday in some distant future. when conditions are perfect and you are completely healed and circumstances finally align. Your miracle is arriving now in this very moment, through the inner transformation you are experiencing as you absorb these words, through the shift in consciousness that allows you to see your life through new eyes, through the release of old patterns of thinking that have kept you locked in limitation. The real miracle is not an external event that will suddenly solve all your problems, though external shifts will certainly follow. The real miracle is the awakening happening inside you right now, the recognition that you are not separate from the intelligence that guides the universe, that Providence is not some distant force you must beg for favors, but the very nature of reality itself, always working through you and for you and as you. When you truly understand this, when you feel it in your bones, you realize that you have never been separate from grace, that even in your darkest moments you are being held by a love so vast and so intelligent that it could use every circumstance, every challenge, every apparent failure as raw material for your evolution into the magnificent being you were always meant to become. If you also seek to understand the mysteries of this divine providence that works silently in your life and wish to continue this journey of awakening to the invisible forces orchestrating your path, this channel is a space dedicated to exploring together the truths that the ancient masters preserved for moments like this. Each week we share teachings that have helped countless souls recognize the hand of Providence even in the most challenging moments, to develop the spiritual vision that allows you to perceive miracles where others see only coincidence. Subscribe to receive these reflections that might be exactly what your consciousness needs to hear in moments when faith wavers and trust in the process seems impossible to maintain. This community of seekers of ancient truth is here to remind each other that we are never truly alone, that there are benevolent forces working constantly in our favor, even when all external evidence seems to suggest otherwise. I deeply appreciate you dedicating your time and attention to this exploration of the mysteries of Providence, and I sincerely hope to continue walking alongside you as we discover together how to consciously cooperate with the invisible forces that are always conspiring for our highest good. Your presence here is no accident. It is Providence revealing itself through your awakening to truths that your soul already knew, but that your mind is only beginning to fully comprehend.